The envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray October Tuesday that made everything feel heavier than it needed to be. Sarah Whitmore stood barefoot on the cracked linoleum of her kitchen, holding the cheap, white envelope between two fingers as if it might dissolve, as if the single handwritten line on its front might rearrange itself into something that made more sense. From the estate of Margaret Ellen Whitmore, it said. Below that, in smaller print, a law firm she had never heard of. Above that, her name, Sarah Elizabeth Whitmore, written in the kind of careful cursive that belonged to people who still remembered how to use fountain pens. Outside the kitchen window, the late afternoon light was failing across a backyard that wasn't really a backyard, just a cement square with a rusting swing set the previous tenants had left behind. Emma, her 6-year-old, was in the living room trying to do long division on the back of a grocery store receipt because they had run out of printer paper 2 weeks ago, and Sarah hadn't had the $12 to buy another ream. Caleb, who was 4, was asleep on the couch with his thumb in his mouth, a habit his pediatrician had told her he would grow out of by age 3. He hadn't. Sarah didn't have the heart to break him of it. Not now, not with everything else. She set the envelope on the counter beside the stack of bills. The stack had its own rhythm these days, a kind of geological layering where the overdue notices from the electric company sat on top, followed by the second notice from the water department. Then the collection agency letters about the hospital stay 2 years ago, when Caleb had gotten pneumonia. Then finally, at the very bottom, the court documents about the house. The house that had been her mother-in-law's, the house David's mother had promised would always be a home for Sarah and the children. The house that had been sold out from under her 3 months after David died, because his mother had never actually changed the deed, and his brother Nathan had decided that family promises didn't survive funerals. She had been renting this duplex on Pine Ridge Road for 11 months now. $940 a month for a 2-bedroom unit with a kitchen sink that leaked into the cabinet below, a heater that clanked like a ghost was trapped in the vents, and a landlord who called her at strange hours to remind her that he was being generous, that anywhere else she would be paying $1,200, that he was doing her a favor because she was a widow with kids and he was a Christian man. Sarah had learned to make her voice small on those calls, to thank him, to promise she would have the rent on time, even when she knew she wouldn't. She picked up the envelope again. Margaret Ellen Whitmore. Great-Aunt Margie. Sarah sat down at the kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg she had stabilized with a folded Burger King napkin, and she tried to remember her great-aunt. The memories came in fragments. A house in Vermont that smelled like cedar and yeast. A woman with silver hair pulled back in a knot at the base of her neck. Hands that had been spotted with age but still strong, still capable. A garden in the back with tomatoes that tasted the way tomatoes were supposed to taste. A voice that had said, when Sarah was maybe 9 years old, that she was the only one in this family who listens with her whole face. Sarah had visited twice as a child, both times with her mother, before her mother had decided that Great-Aunt Margie was too difficult, too stubborn, too old-fashioned, and had stopped inviting her to anything. Sarah had sent Christmas cards every year until she was 22. Then she had gotten married, and Christmas cards had become one of the things that fell away in the years of small babies and small money, and she had told herself she would start again, and she had never started again. Aunt Margie had died in August. Sarah had not known. Nobody had called. There had been no funeral announcement in any paper she read, because she didn't read papers anymore, because she didn't have time, because she spent her evenings counting out quarters for Emma's milk money and wondering if she could stretch the peanut butter another 3 days. She opened the envelope with a butter knife because she couldn't find scissors. Inside was a single sheet of law firm letterhead and a small manila folder. The letter was brief. Dear Ms. Whitmore, we represent the estate of Margaret Ellen Whitmore, who passed away on August 14th of this year. Per the terms of her last will and testament, you have been designated as the sole beneficiary of a specific bequest. Enclosed, please find documentation regarding the property, a copy of the relevant section of the will, and instructions for collecting the item in person. The property has a recorded estate value of $6.00, which has been paid in full from the estate's residual funds. No further action is required on your part beyond collection. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. Sarah read it 3 times. $6. The estate value of what she had been left was $6. She opened the manila folder. There was a copy of a page from the will. Aunt Margie's signature at the bottom, shaky but clear. The relevant paragraph was short. To my great-niece, Sarah Elizabeth Whitmore, I bequeath one Cedar trunk, currently located in the attic of my residence at 47 Bramblewood Lane, Ashfield, Vermont. The trunk and its entire contents are to be delivered to her without inspection, without inventory, and without modification. The assessed value of this bequest for estate purposes is $6.00. She will understand when she opens it. Sarah sat very still at the kitchen table. She read the paragraph again. She will understand when she opens it. The words did something strange to her chest, a small hot pressure behind the breastbone that she had not felt in a long time and could not immediately name. She thought it might be hope. She thought it might be grief. She thought probably it was both, which was how most things felt now. Emma appeared in the doorway holding the grocery store receipt. "Mom," she said, "what's 412 divided by 6? Sarah looked up. Her daughter had her father's eyes, the same serious dark brown, the same way of waiting patiently for an answer instead of guessing. 68.667 repeating, Sarah said. Emma nodded and went back to the living room. Sarah heard her writing it down with the stub of a pencil they had found under the couch. She folded the letter back into the envelope. She put the envelope on the refrigerator under a magnet shaped like a strawberry. She went to the living room and sat on the couch beside Caleb, and she put her hand on his soft hair, and she tried to think about what this meant. A cedar trunk. In Vermont. $6. She will understand when she opens it. It was the last line that stayed with her, that sounded like her aunt's voice, that felt like a hand on her shoulder from a woman who had been dead for 2 months and whom she had not even known was sick. She did not tell her mother that night. She did not tell her sister Jessica. She did not tell Nathan, who still called sometimes to ask if she had gotten her things out of what used to be his mother's garage, even though he knew perfectly well she had nothing left in the garage because he had thrown it all away. She lay in bed that night with Caleb tucked against her side because he still couldn't sleep alone after the move, and she thought about Cedar in Vermont and the smell of a kitchen in summer, and she thought about $6, and for the first time in months she did not cry herself to sleep. The next morning, she called the law firm from the parking lot of Emma's school, sitting in her 14-year-old Honda Civic with the check engine light that had been on since spring. The paralegal was kind. Her name was Denise, and she had one of those voices that did not rush you. Yes, Denise said, the trunk is being held at the residence, which is under the care of a neighbor until the estate closes. Yes, Sarah could come at her convenience. No, there was no deadline, though the neighbor, a Mr. Henry Caldwell, had asked to be given notice so he could unlock the house. Yes, it was in Ashfield, Vermont, which was approximately 6.5 hours away from where Sarah lived in western Pennsylvania. Yes, the bequest was very specific that Sarah herself must collect it. Sarah thanked her. She hung up. She sat in the parking lot and looked at the pickup line forming for the morning bell, and she did the math. 6.5 hours each way. Gas, probably $80 round trip, maybe more. Food on the road. 2 days off work. A motel if they couldn't make it back in one day. She worked 2 jobs, days at a medical billing office where she made $17 an hour, and 3 nights a week at a diner on Route 30 where she made tips. Neither job gave her paid time off. A weekend trip, then. She could leave Friday after the billing office closed, drive overnight with the kids asleep in the back, and be in Ashfield by morning. She told her sister Jessica first, because Jessica was the only person in her family who still treated her like a person instead of like a cautionary tale. They were on the phone Thursday night, Jessica at her kitchen counter in Delaware, Sarah folding laundry on her bed. You got what? Jessica said. A cedar trunk, Sarah said. From Aunt Margie. Aunt Margie died. I know. I just found out. Oh, Sarah. I'm sorry, Jessica said. And there was a silence, and then she said, a trunk, like a physical trunk. And Sarah said, yes, a physical trunk. And Jessica said, well, that's weird. And Sarah laughed, a small real laugh. The first she had laughed in a week. Because it was weird, it was exactly the kind of thing Aunt Margie would do, bequeath a box to a great niece she barely knew and trust the rest. The next morning Sarah made the mistake of telling her mother. Her mother lived with her sister Jessica now, but she came to the phone anyway, because she had been waiting for a call, because she always had antennae up for news she could interpret as proof that Sarah had continued to fail at life. When Sarah said the word trunk, her mother laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was the laugh of a woman who had been waiting 63 years to be proven right about everything. A trunk, her mother said. Oh, Sarah. Oh, honey. A trunk. What is it? Your grandmother's doilies. Her dead cat's collar. Her mother laughed again. You drove all the way to Vermont, Sarah, in that car, with those kids, for a trunk that the will itself says is worth $6. I haven't driven anywhere yet, Mom. But you're going to. You're going to, because you always do this, Sarah. You always fall for the sentimental nonsense. You always think there's some beautiful hidden thing waiting for you around the corner. Her mother's voice sharpened. That woman hated me, Sarah. She and I had a falling out 40 years ago, and she never forgave me. Do you know what I think she left you? I think she left you a pile of moldy quilts and a taxidermied squirrel. I think she left you that because she knew you were weak enough to drive 6 hours for it. Sarah pressed her hand against her forehead. I have to go, Mom. Nathan called not an hour later. Nathan, who had not called her in 5 months, who had changed the locks on his mother's house 2 days after David's funeral, who had told Sarah at the reading of his mother's will that she was not really family because David had only been her husband for 6 years. Sarah did not know how Nathan had heard. She suspected her mother. Sarah, Nathan said, and his voice was the oily, friendly voice he used when he was about to ask her for something or about to insult her. Heard you got a little surprise from the old country. $6. Congratulations. Nathan, Sarah said. I'm kind of busy. Just wanted to say, he said, if you need help hauling away whatever junk that woman left you, I've got a truck. I could come get it. I'll even split whatever you get at the dump with you. 50-50. I don't need your truck, Nathan. You sure? Because I was thinking, you barely remembered that old lady existed, and here she is leaving you a trunk worth less than a gallon of milk, and you're going to drag 2 little kids across 3 states to go get it. That's the kind of judgment that loses people custody, Sarah. Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. She hung up without speaking. She stood in her kitchen for a full minute with her eyes closed, and when she opened them, Emma was standing in the doorway, pretending she hadn't been listening but listening, with the receipt in her hand and the pencil stub and a face that was too old for 6. Mom, Emma said softly, are we going on a trip? Sarah crouched down. She put her hands on her daughter's narrow shoulders. Yes, she said. We're going on a trip this weekend. It's going to be a long drive, but we're going to a pretty place, a place where your great-great-aunt Margie used to live, and we're going to pick something up that she wanted me to have. What is it? Emma asked. I don't know yet, Sarah said. Is it treasure? Emma asked. Sarah smiled, and it was a real smile, small and tired but real. Probably not, sweetheart. But it's a mystery, and we get to go solve it. Emma thought about this for a moment, with the gravity of a small attorney. Then she nodded and said, okay, and she went back to her division. They left on Friday at 4:45 in the afternoon, the Civic packed with a duffel bag of clothes and a cooler of sandwiches, a bag of apples Sarah had paid for with coins at the Dollar General, 2 pillows, 3 blankets, and Caleb's stuffed rabbit, which was missing 1 ear because he had chewed it off during the week his grandmother died. Sarah had filled the tank with the last $45 on her gas card. She had $11 and some change in her wallet. She had $640 in her checking account, and rent was due on the 5th. The drive was long. She took Interstate 80 East, the great flat ribbon of it unspooling through Pennsylvania, past exits for towns she had never visited and would never visit, past truck stops with their sodium lights, past the great dark shoulders of the Poconos. Caleb fell asleep before they left the county. Emma stayed up longer, narrating the shapes of clouds until it got dark, and then reading a magic treehouse book with her little flashlight until her eyes got heavy and the book slid from her hands. Sarah drove on in silence. The radio was broken. It had been broken for 2 years. She listened to the hum of the tires and the occasional breath of her sleeping children, and she thought about her life in small, sharp pieces. David, standing in their first kitchen, trying to fix a broken garbage disposal with a butter knife, and almost electrocuting himself and laughing so hard he had to sit down on the floor. David, at the hospital, holding Emma the first time, his whole face gone soft in a way she had never seen on any man before. David, in the driver's seat of a Ford F-150 that was not his, coming back from a job on a highway he did not usually take, at 7:30 in the morning, when a man who had been drinking all night had crossed the center line. She thought about the insurance, which had been less than they had thought because David had let the larger policy lapse during a tight month 2 years before. She thought about his mother, Eleanor, who had wept on Sarah's shoulder at the funeral and who had died 19 months later without ever writing the new deed. She thought about Nathan. She thought about the rent. She stopped at a rest area outside Scranton and slept for 2 hours with her forehead on the steering wheel. She started driving again before dawn. By 6 in the morning, she was climbing into New England, the trees changing their character, the red maples and the white birches, the air through the cracked window going sharper and colder and cleaner, and by 7:30, with the sun coming up pale gold over a ridge of sugar maples, she was pulling into a town so small and so perfect and so entirely unlike where she lived that it looked like a postcard that someone had built a road into. Ashfield, Vermont. Population 412. The sign was hand-carved. The town had one traffic light, one general store, one white-steepled church with a bell that was ringing the hour as she drove past. Emma woke up in the back seat and pressed her face to the window and whispered, "Mom, it's pretty." Bramblewood Lane was at the edge of town, past the general store, past a cemetery with iron railings, up a gentle road that curved between stone walls and then opened into a long driveway under a canopy of old oaks. The house at the end of the driveway was not a mansion. It was a farmhouse. 2 stories, white clapboard going soft at the corners, a red front door, a porch with a swing on it, a chimney of river stones. A black cat was sitting on the front step as if it had been waiting for them. There was a garden in the front, gone to seed now, but clearly loved, tall dead sunflowers bowing their heavy heads, a patch of kale still holding on against the frost. Sarah parked. She sat for a moment with her hands on the steering wheel. Emma unbuckled herself in the back and leaned forward between the seats. "Mom," she said, "whose house is this?" "It was your great-great-aunt's," Sarah said. "It's empty now." Emma was quiet. Then she said, "It doesn't feel empty." Sarah looked at her daughter in the rearview mirror. Emma had her hands folded in her lap the way she did when she was thinking hard. Sarah did not know what her daughter meant, but she understood. The house did not feel empty. It felt like someone had just stepped out and would be back in a minute. Henry Caldwell was waiting on the porch. He had on a Carhartt jacket and a wool cap, and he was maybe 70 years old, with a face that looked like he had spent it outdoors. He walked down the steps slowly as Sarah got out of the car. He did not rush her. He waited while she got Caleb, still half asleep, onto her hip, and while Emma climbed out and stood staring at everything with her small face intent. "You must be Sarah," Henry said. "Yes." He nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. "You have her eyes," he said. "Whose?" "Margie's. Around the corners. It's the way you look at a thing." Sarah did not know what to say to that. She had not thought she looked like anyone. She had certainly not thought she looked like her great-aunt. Henry opened the front door. He did not go in. He said, "She wanted you to do this alone. I'll be in the kitchen if you need me. I made coffee. There's hot cocoa for the little ones." He glanced at Emma, who was gripping Sarah's free hand. He smiled at her, and it was a real smile that reached his eyes. "Your aunt used to make me cocoa when I was about your age," he said to Emma. "I'm going to make yours the same way she did." Emma considered him. Then she nodded. Sarah stepped into the house. The smell hit her first. Cedar, old wood, dried lavender, a faint sweetness of apples from a bowl someone had forgotten to empty in the front room. And under all of that, something else, something she could only describe as the smell of a life that had been lived carefully and slowly, the smell of a house that had been loved. The front room had a braided rug, a green armchair by the window with a reading lamp beside it, a shelf of books with their spines worn to softness, a fireplace with ash still in it from the last fire Margie had ever built. There were photographs on the mantel. Sarah walked to them. Her own face looked back at her from one of them, 9 years old, standing in the garden with a tomato in her hand, grinning at the camera. Sarah did not remember the photograph being taken. She did not remember the day. She pressed her fingertips against the glass. The stairs creaked under her feet, the way old stairs always did. She carried Caleb. Emma followed behind her, quiet. The second floor had 3 bedrooms and a narrow hallway, and at the end of the hallway, a door with a small brass pull. The attic door. The attic stairs were steep. Sarah set Caleb down on the bed in the nearest bedroom, tucking a quilt around him. He did not wake. Emma stayed with him, sitting cross-legged at the foot of the bed, watching her brother with the serious attention of an older sister. "I'll watch him, Mom," she said. "You go." Sarah climbed the attic stairs alone. The attic was long and low, with a single round window at the far end that let in a wash of pale morning light. Boxes lined one wall. A dress form stood in a corner, draped in an old sheet. A rocking chair, a sewing machine with a treadle. And there, in the center of the floor, in the pool of light from the window, was the trunk. It was not large. It was not small. It was cedar, a deep honey color with age, bound in brass at the corners. The lid was curved slightly. There was a brass lock on the front, but the lock was already open, the hasp hanging loose. A white envelope was taped to the top of the trunk. On the envelope, in her great-aunt's careful handwriting, one word. Sarah. Sarah sat down on the attic floor in front of the trunk. The floorboards were cold through her jeans. She peeled the envelope off the lid, and her fingers were trembling, and she did not know why. She opened the envelope. The letter inside was written on the same stationery her aunt had always used, cream-colored with a small sprig of lavender printed in the corner. My dear Sarah, the letter began. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and I have done what I hoped I would have the strength to do. I have left you something that will change your life, and I have done it without telling a soul, because I have watched this family for 86 years, and I know what they are capable of when money is mentioned, and I did not want them to take from you what is yours. You will not remember me well. You were very small when we knew each other. I remember you, though. I remember the summer you were 9, when your mother brought you here for 2 weeks, because she needed somewhere to leave you while she sorted out her second marriage. You were quiet. You followed me around the garden, and you asked me questions about the bees. You wanted to know why the queen bee was bigger than the others, and whether the workers ever wondered what it was like to be the queen. You were a serious little girl, and you had a mind that noticed things, and I told your mother at the end of those 2 weeks that you were the finest person in our family, and she laughed at me, because she did not understand what I meant. I have followed you, Sarah, from a distance, because your mother cut me off after we argued, but I have followed you. I had my ways. I knew when you married David. I knew when your children were born. I knew when David died. I knew when Eleanor's house was taken from you. I wrote to you many times and tore the letters up, because I was not sure you remembered me, and I did not want to intrude on a grief you were carrying alone. I am writing this letter in July of this year, and I am dying, Sarah. The doctor has given me 6 weeks, maybe 8. I have told no one. I do not want to fuss. I have lived for 89 years, and I am tired, and I am ready. And I have spent these last months putting my affairs in order so that you, my dear Sarah, will never again have to count quarters for your daughter's milk money. Inside this trunk, Sarah, is everything I have. I do not mean sentimental things, though there are those too. I mean everything. My whole estate. Every bit of it, distilled down and placed inside this box, because I could not trust any bank or any lawyer or any relative with what I had to give you. I wrote the will to say it was worth $6, because that is the price of the padlock I bought at the hardware store to put on this trunk. The contents, I believed, were priceless, and what is priceless, in the eyes of the law, is worth nothing. Open the trunk slowly, Sarah. Take your time. Nothing in here is dangerous. Everything in here is for you. When you understand what I have done, you may be afraid. You may think it is too much, or that you cannot accept it, or that someone will come and take it from you. Do not be afraid. I have thought of everything. There is a letter deeper inside that will tell you exactly what to do, who to call, how to protect yourself and your children. I have spent the last 4 months of my life making sure that when you opened this trunk, you would not be alone in what came next. You have been alone for too long, my girl. That is ending today. With all my love, and with a pride in you that I wish I had found the courage to tell you in person, your Aunt Margie. Sarah read the letter twice. When she finished the second reading, she realized that she was crying, and that she had been crying for some time, and that her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper. She set the letter down on the floorboards beside her. She pressed both hands flat against the lid of the trunk, and she could feel the grain of the wood under her palms, and she could smell the cedar, clean and sharp, and she thought of a woman she had barely known, who had loved her anyway, across 40 years of silence. She opened the trunk. The first layer was what she expected. Linens. A quilt folded carefully, a pattern of stars, the hand-stitching small and even. Beneath that, a set of embroidered pillowcases. Beneath that, an oval locket on a gold chain, with the name Margaret inscribed on the back. Beneath that, a bundle of letters tied with a blue ribbon, the letters old, the paper yellowed. Beneath that, a small wooden box containing a pair of gold earrings and a silver thimble, and a photograph of a young man in a World War II uniform whose face Sarah did not know. She set each layer carefully on the floor beside the trunk. She thought, for a moment, that this was what it would be. A trunk of sentimental things, the way her mother had mocked. Mom's doilies, Nathan had said. She did not mind. She thought, as she lifted the quilt to her face and breathed in the cedar, that these things alone would have been worth the drive. She would take the quilt home and put it on Caleb's bed, and she would wear the locket, and she would write her aunt a thank you letter and seal it, and put it in the trunk itself, where Aunt Margie would never read it, but where it would exist, spoken into the wood. Then she lifted out the bundle of linens at the bottom of that first layer, and she saw that the trunk had a false bottom. It was subtle, a thin cedar panel, perfectly fitted, with a small brass ring set into a recessed handle at one end. If she had not been looking, she would not have seen it. But she had been looking, because her aunt's letter had said, deeper inside, and Sarah had learned, in a life of being overlooked and underestimated, to pay attention when someone told her there was more than what showed on the surface. She hooked her finger through the brass ring. She pulled. The false bottom lifted out in one smooth piece. And Sarah Elizabeth Whitmore, sitting on a cold attic floor in a small Vermont town, 34 years old, widowed for 3 years, behind on her rent, with 2 children sleeping in the room below her, looked down into the second level of the cedar trunk and stopped breathing. Below her, in neat rows that filled the entire lower compartment, were bundles of $100 bills. They were banded in paper straps. They were stacked 3 deep. They were real. She could tell they were real because she had handled enough $100 bills at the diner, over the years, to know the weight and the feel of them, the slight roughness of the paper, the way real money had a smell, faintly metallic, like old pennies in ink. She reached out. She touched one of the bundles. She lifted it. The band around it read $10,000. She counted the bundles in the top row. 20. She set the top row on the floor, one by one, with hands that had gone numb. Beneath the top row was another row. 20 more bundles. Beneath that, another, and another, and another. She sat back on her heels. She put her hand over her mouth. She made a small sound that was not a word. 200 bundles. $10,000 each. $2 million in cash. Sitting in a cedar trunk in an attic in Vermont, in a house she had barely remembered, left to her by a woman she had barely known. And tucked into the side of the compartment, in a clear plastic sleeve, was a second envelope, thicker than the first. On the front of it, in the same careful handwriting, another single word. Begin. Sarah did not open the second envelope immediately. She could not have. Her hands would not have worked. She sat on the attic floor for a long time, with the money around her, with the cold coming up through the floorboards, and she tried to understand what she was looking at. She tried to understand that this was real. She tried to understand that the rent, the thing that had sat like a black cloud on her chest for 11 months, was not a problem anymore. She tried to understand that Emma's winter coat, the one she had been pricing at the thrift store and could not afford, could be bought today. That Caleb's pediatrician, who had not been paid in 9 months because the bill kept going to collections, could be paid tonight. That the check engine light in the Civic could become a repair instead of a prayer. She could not understand any of it yet. It was too big. She had lived too long inside the shape of not enough, and her mind could not reshape itself fast enough to hold the shape of enough. Downstairs, she heard the sound of Caleb waking up and starting to cry for her, his small voice thin through the floorboards. She heard Emma's voice, soft and patient, saying, "It's okay, buddy, Mommy's upstairs, I've got you." She heard the scrape of Henry's chair in the kitchen as he stood to come check. Sarah wiped her face with the back of her hand. She took a long shaking breath. She carefully put the top layer back over the money, covering it, and then she laid the quilt and the linens back on top of the false bottom, and then she closed the lid of the trunk. She put the second letter, the thick envelope, into the inside pocket of her jacket. She stood up. Her knees hurt. Her face felt hot. She went down the attic stairs slowly, and she went into the bedroom, and she picked up her son, and she kissed the top of his head, and she said, "Hey, buddy, hey, I've got you. I'm here." Emma was watching her face. Emma missed nothing. Emma said, "Mom, are you okay?" Sarah looked at her daughter. She looked at her 6-year-old with her serious eyes and her careful hands. And she thought about every night Emma had gone to bed hungry and pretended she wasn't. Every pair of too small shoes Emma had worn without complaint. Every time Emma had said no thank you to a school trip because she knew there was no money for the field trip fee. Yes, baby, Sarah said, and her voice broke. I'm okay. I'm better than okay. I think we're going to be okay. Emma studied her for a long moment. Then she slid off the bed and came and wrapped her thin arms around Sarah's waist, with Caleb on Sarah's hip, and she held on, and Sarah held them both, and she stood in the middle of her Great-Aunt's bedroom with her two small children pressed against her, and she understood, for the first time in 3 years, that the worst part might be over. Downstairs, in the kitchen, Henry Caldwell was stirring a pot of cocoa on the old gas stove. He looked up when she came in. He looked at her face. He did not ask. He simply pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and said, "Sit down, Sarah. Drink something hot, and then we'll talk." Sarah sat. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Caleb settled into her lap, his small warm weight a kind of anchor, and Emma pulled the chair beside hers and climbed onto it and watched Henry pour cocoa into 2 small mugs and a larger one. Henry slid the cocoa to the children first. He slid a cup of coffee to Sarah. Then he sat down across from her, with his own coffee in a mug that said "World's Okayest Grandpa," and he folded his big, weathered hands around the cup, and he waited. Sarah did not know what to say. She was aware of the letter in her jacket pocket, the thick one, the one marked "Begin." She was aware that she had $2 million sitting in an attic 30 feet above her head. She was aware that this man, this stranger, probably knew. She was aware that she did not know, yet, how much of her Great-Aunt's plan he had been part of. Henry read her face. His own face was kind but not gentle, if that made sense, the face of a man who had seen hard things and was not going to pretend otherwise. He said, "Your aunt and I were friends for 41 years. She was my neighbor when my wife was alive, and after my wife died, she was the person who kept me from turning into a hermit. She talked to me about you in the last year of her life. A great deal. She told me what she was doing, not the specific numbers. She didn't want me to know that. She said, 'Henry, what I am doing is either the greatest kindness I have ever committed or the greatest folly, and only Sarah will be able to tell me which, and by then I will be dead, so it is up to her.'" Henry took a sip of his coffee. He looked at Sarah over the rim of the cup. He said, "I don't need to know what's in that trunk. I don't want to know. But I know there's something, and I know it's significant, and I know your aunt had a plan for what came next. She said there would be a letter. Is there a letter?" Sarah nodded. She could not speak yet. "All right," Henry said. "Then here's what I'm going to tell you, because she made me promise. Number 1, you do not tell anyone today. Not your mother, not your sister, not your brother-in-law, not a friend, not a neighbor, not anyone, for at least 2 weeks. That was her rule. Number 2, you read that letter and you do exactly what it says, in the order it says to do it, and you do not improvise. Your aunt thought about this for a year. She was a sharp woman. Whatever she wrote in that letter is what you need to do. Number 3, you are welcome to stay here as long as you need to. The house is yours to use while the estate settles. You and the kids. There's heat, there's hot water, there's food in the pantry, there's a bed made up in the back bedroom. You look like you haven't slept in a week. You look like you haven't eaten a real meal in a month. Before you do one other thing today, you are going to eat and you are going to sleep." Sarah opened her mouth to protest, out of habit, out of the long reflex of not accepting help, and Henry held up one finger. "Don't," he said. "Just don't. Your aunt told me you would try to refuse. She told me to tell you that accepting help is not the same as failing. She told me to tell you that a woman who has been strong alone for 3 years is allowed to sit down in a warm kitchen and let someone else cook for an hour. That was her message. Now, eggs and toast, or pancakes." Sarah's throat closed. She could not speak. She nodded, just a small nod, and a tear slipped down her cheek, and she did not wipe it away. "Pancakes it is," Henry said gently. "Emma, honey, can you help me get the eggs out of the fridge?" Emma, who had been watching this exchange with her small grave attention, slid off her chair and followed Henry to the refrigerator. Caleb, in Sarah's lap, looked up at her and put his sticky hand on her cheek and said, "Mommy, don't cry." And Sarah kissed his hand and said, "I'm not crying because I'm sad, buddy. I'm crying because a nice man is making us pancakes." Caleb accepted this with the logic of a 4-year-old. He said, "Oh, and then, can I have chocolate chips in mine?" The pancakes were thick and buttery, and Henry had real maple syrup from a local sugar bush. And Sarah watched her children eat them, watched Emma take small measured bites because she had been trained by scarcity to make food last, watched Caleb cover his pancakes in so much syrup that it pooled on the plate, and he dragged each piece through it with serious concentration. She ate her own pancakes slowly, and she drank 2 cups of coffee, and when her plate was empty, Henry refilled it without asking, and she ate the second plate, too, and something in her chest that had been clenched for a very long time began, slowly, to unclench. After breakfast, Henry showed them the back bedroom. It was a small room with a double bed covered in a quilt that matched the one from the trunk, and a window that looked out over the garden, and a bookshelf full of children's books. Caleb took one look at the bookshelf and said, "Is this my room?" And Sarah did not have the heart to correct him, and she said, "Just for tonight, buddy." The bed was soft. Caleb climbed into it, and Emma climbed in after him, and Sarah pulled the quilt up over both of them, and within 3 minutes Caleb was asleep, and within 5, Emma was, too. Her small hand curled around her brother's wrist the way she had slept every night of his life. Sarah stood in the doorway and watched them. Then she closed the door softly behind her, and she walked down the hall to Margie's own bedroom, and she sat on the edge of the bed, and she took the second letter out of her jacket pocket, and she opened it. The letter was 11 pages long. It was written on the same cream-colored stationery, in her aunt's careful handwriting, and it was dated, on the first page, July 14th, just a month before her death. Sarah read it all, from the first word to the last, and when she finished, she went back and read it again. The letter laid out everything, every step, every person Sarah was supposed to contact, and every person Sarah was supposed to avoid. There was the name of a lawyer in Burlington, a woman named Patricia Alden, who had been Aunt Margie's attorney for 30 years and who was expecting Sarah's call. There was the name of a financial advisor in Boston, a man named Daniel Torres, who specialized in unexpected inheritances and who had already been retained with a deposit. There was the name of an accountant. There was a step-by-step list of what to do with the money, in what order, over what timeline, to protect it from taxes, from vultures, from Sarah's own mother, from Nathan, from anyone who might try to take it. Aunt Margie had thought of everything. She had explained, in plain language, how she had come to have the money in the first place. She had inherited a small farm from her own parents in the 1950s. She had sold it in 1974 after her husband died, and she had put the money into an investment account with a man she trusted, and she had never touched it, living instead on her Social Security and the small pension she had earned as a schoolteacher. The account had grown for 50 years. She had withdrawn it, in cash, in small increments over the last 18 months, so as not to trigger any notice, and she had placed it in the trunk, and she had written this letter, and she had waited to die. "I am not giving you this money, Sarah," the letter said near the end. "I am giving you back the time I believe should have been yours. The time you have spent counting pennies and lying awake and working yourself to the bone for landlords and bosses who do not see you. You are 34 years old. You are a mother of 2 small children. You have already lost your husband and your home and most of your hope. This money does not buy those things back. Nothing does. But it buys you the thing I had and did not fully appreciate until I was old. It buys you time. Time to raise your children with your full attention. Time to rest. Time to decide what you actually want to do with your one life, instead of only what you have to do to survive it. I want you to promise me one thing, my dear. Use it well. Do not let it change you into someone your children would not recognize. Keep working, if that is what you want. Go back to school, if that is what you want. Buy a little house. Put money away for those children's education. Help someone, sometime, the way I am helping you now. Pay attention to bees in the garden. Cook a meal slowly. Sleep. I loved you from the time you were 9 years old, Sarah. I do not know why. Perhaps because when everyone else in the family was noise, you were quiet. Perhaps because you looked at my tomatoes the way other children looked at Christmas presents. Perhaps because you asked me about the queen bee. I saw something in you, and I have watched that something struggle to stay alive under circumstances that would have killed lesser things, and I have decided, with my last months, that I will not go quietly into whatever comes next until I have given you a chance. Take the chance, Sarah. Take it with both hands. You deserve it. You have always deserved it. All my love, Aunt Margie. Sarah folded the letter. She pressed it against her chest. She sat on the edge of the bed in the room where her great-aunt had slept and died, and she cried, properly cried, for the first time since David's funeral, the kind of crying that comes up from a place so deep you did not know you had it. She cried for David. She cried for Eleanor. She cried for her aunt, whom she had not known well enough, and who had known her better than anyone. She cried for the 3 years of nights she had spent on the bathroom floor of whatever apartment she was in that month, counting out pills to see if she had enough to pay for groceries. She cried because it was over. She cried because she was not sure it was over. She cried because she was afraid to believe it was over. After a long time, she stopped. She washed her face in the small bathroom at the end of the hall. She looked at herself in the mirror. She did not look like a woman who had just inherited $2 million. She looked like a tired mother who had been crying. But something in her eyes was different. Something had lit. She went back downstairs. Henry was at the kitchen table reading a farm journal. He looked up. Sarah said, "I need to make a phone call. To a lawyer in Burlington." Henry nodded. He said, "There's a landline in the front room. Private. I'll keep an eye on the kids. Take as long as you need." Sarah called Patricia Alden. The phone rang twice, and a woman answered, and when Sarah said her name, the woman on the other end of the line said, "Oh, thank God. Sarah, I have been waiting 2 months for this call. Are you at the house? Is Henry with you? Are you safe? How are the children?" Sarah sat on the arm of the green armchair by the window, and she started to tell Patricia Alden everything. And Patricia Alden listened with the same patience Denise had had on Sarah's first call, and at the end of it, she said, "All right. Here is what we are going to do, starting this afternoon and going through the next 2 weeks. And I need you to listen carefully and write this down." Sarah wrote it down on the back of a grocery list she found on the coffee table. She filled 3 pages of the small notebook Patricia had told her to find in the desk drawer. By the time she hung up the phone, her hand was cramping, and she had a list that included a safe deposit box at a credit union in Burlington, an appointment with Daniel Torres in Boston the following Wednesday, a letter to her current landlord that Patricia would draft, and a power of attorney form that would allow Patricia to speak on Sarah's behalf to anyone in the family who tried to contact Sarah about Aunt Margie's will. The most important thing, Patricia said at the end, is this: you tell no one yet. Not yet. Not this week. We have a 2-week window to get everything properly sheltered and legally protected before you tell a single person. Do you have the strength to keep this secret for 2 weeks, Sarah? Sarah thought about her mother's laugh on the phone. She thought about Nathan's oily voice. She thought about Emma, upstairs, asleep under a quilt her great-great-aunt had sewn. "Yes," Sarah said. "I have the strength." "Good," Patricia said. "Then let's get to work." Sarah hung up the phone. She sat for a moment in the quiet front room with the braided rug and the photograph of her 9-year-old self on the mantel. The black cat had come in from the porch and was sitting on the windowsill now, watching her with yellow eyes, as if taking her measure. Sarah stood up and walked over to the cat. The cat did not move. She held out her hand. The cat sniffed her knuckles, and then, after a moment of deliberation, pushed its head up under her palm and purred. "What's your name?" Sarah said softly. Henry spoke from the kitchen doorway. "That's Biscuit. She was Margie's. I've been feeding her since August, but she doesn't really like me. She's been waiting for somebody. Looks like maybe she was waiting for you." Sarah scratched Biscuit behind the ears. Biscuit closed her eyes. For a moment, in the weak October sunshine coming through the front window, with a cat purring under her hand, and a letter from a dead woman tucked inside her jacket, and $2 million waiting in the attic above her, Sarah Whitmore felt something that she had forgotten was even a feeling. She felt safe. It was a strange feeling. She did not entirely trust it. She had been unsafe for so long that safety itself felt suspicious, felt like a trap, felt like something that was about to be taken away. She kept waiting, through that long afternoon, for the other shoe to drop. She kept half expecting her phone to ring with Nathan's voice on it, or her mother's, or for a sheriff to pull up the driveway with an eviction notice that had somehow reached her even here. None of that happened. The afternoon passed in a kind of slow gold quiet. Emma and Caleb woke up, and Henry made them grilled cheese sandwiches, and Emma helped Sarah wash the dishes afterward, standing on a footstool at the sink, and she asked, "Mom, are we going home tonight?" Sarah crouched down so she was eye level with her daughter. Emma's hair was tangled from sleeping. There was a streak of cocoa on her chin. Sarah said, "How would you feel about staying here for a few days?" "Just a few. Then we'll go home and get some things, and then we might come back here again." Emma considered this with her whole small face. Is it a vacation? She asked. Kind of, Sarah said. It's more like your great-great-aunt Margie wanted us to take some time here, to take care of some things, and to rest. Emma nodded slowly. She said, I like it here. Caleb likes the cat. Is there school here? There's school everywhere, sweetheart. But you don't have to worry about school this week. I already left a message for your teacher. Emma was silent for a moment, doing her long, careful thinking, and then she said, Mom, I don't want to go back to our apartment. Sarah's heart twisted. Honey, we have to go back eventually. That's where our stuff is. But we don't have to stay there forever. Okay, we have choices now. Emma looked up. Her dark eyes were steady. She said, in that quiet voice she used for the important things, I was going to run away. Last month, I was going to go to the library and live in the kids section because it has couches and the librarians are nice, and there's a bathroom. But then I thought, who would make sure Caleb brushed his teeth? So I didn't go. Sarah did not cry. She did not let herself cry. She put her arms around her daughter, and she held her, and she said, against Emma's tangled hair, I am so proud of you. I am so proud of you. And I promise you, right now, in this kitchen, that you will never have to plan to run away again. I promise you. Do you believe me? Emma considered her mother's face for a long moment. Then she said, yes, and she went back to drying the plates. That night, Sarah made dinner in her great-aunt's kitchen. She made a simple pasta with butter and Parmesan, because that was all she knew how to make from what was in the pantry. She fed her children at a table that had been in the family for 100 years. She tucked them in at 7:30, with Biscuit the cat sleeping in a circle at the foot of their bed. She went back downstairs and she sat in the green armchair by the front window, and she looked at the lights of Ashfield twinkling through the bare branches of the oak trees, and she thought about the morning she was going to open the trunk again. She was going to put half of the money, as Patricia had instructed her, into a canvas bag Henry would provide. She was going to drive with Henry into Burlington to a credit union where Patricia had arranged a safe deposit box and a transitional account in Sarah's name. She was going to begin the long, strange, surreal process of becoming a woman with money after 34 years of being a woman without. But tonight, she was just going to sit. The house was quiet. The old wood of it settled and clicked around her. Somewhere upstairs, Caleb made a small sleep noise, and Biscuit purred. Henry had gone home for the evening. After making her promise she would call him if she needed anything, and after leaving her with a plate of oatmeal cookies he had apparently just baked in his own kitchen and walked over. Sarah took the oatmeal cookies to the armchair. She ate 2 of them slowly. She looked at the fireplace, where ash still sat from her aunt's last fire. She thought, tomorrow I will build a fire in this fireplace. Tomorrow I will build a fire, and my children will sit by it, and I will read them a book from Aunt Margie's shelves, and I will not be counting the minutes until I have to leave for the diner. She thought about her mother. She thought about the laugh on the phone. She thought about Nathan's truck and his 50-50 offer. She thought about how, in 2 weeks, after Patricia's window had closed and the money was safe, she was going to have a conversation with each of them. She did not look forward to it. She did not know, yet, what she was going to say. But she knew, for the first time in her adult life, that she was going to say it from a position where they could not hurt her anymore. She finished her second cookie. She turned off the lamp. She climbed the stairs in the dark, by the feel of the handrail under her palm, the way her aunt must have climbed them for 50 years, and she got into the bed in the back bedroom beside her sleeping children, and she pulled the quilt up to her chin, and she closed her eyes, and she slept, and she did not dream, and she did not wake up until morning. And in the morning the sun was coming through the window in a clean pale stripe across the quilt. And somewhere downstairs a cat was meowing too. Be let out. And for the first time in 3 years, Sarah Whitmore woke up without feeling afraid. Sarah woke before her children did, which had not happened in over a year. The light in the back bedroom was pale and cold, and the quilt was heavy across her legs. And for a long, strange moment, she did not remember where she was. Then she remembered. She remembered all of it. The trunk, the money, the letter, the cat, her aunt's handwriting across 11 pages of stationery. She turned her head on the pillow and looked at her children, still asleep. Caleb with his mouth open and his rabbit pressed against his cheek. Emma curled into a small tight question mark with her hand on her brother's wrist. She got up quietly. She dressed in yesterday's clothes because she had not thought to pack enough. She went downstairs in her socks, and Biscuit was already waiting at the kitchen door, and she let the cat out into the cold, bright morning. The grass was silver with frost. Her breath made a plume. She stood on the back steps in her Great-Aunt's socks, looking at a garden she did not yet know, and she thought, I am going to be all right. Henry arrived at 7:30 with a paper bag of fresh biscuits from the town bakery and a thermos of coffee and a canvas duffel bag folded under his arm. He did not comment on the duffel bag. He set it on a kitchen chair. He set the biscuits on the table. He poured Sarah a cup of coffee without asking. He said, Patricia called me at 6. She wants us on the road to Burlington by 9. It's about 2 hours up. She's cleared her morning. The credit union manager knows we're coming. Everything is set. Sarah nodded. She did not trust her voice yet. You eaten? Henry asked. I will. Eat now, he said. It's going to be a long day. She buttered a biscuit. She ate it slowly. She thought, a week ago this week I ate a cup of ramen for dinner and told Emma I had already eaten so she could have the apple. A week ago this week my bank account had $71 in it, and I was trying to decide whether to pay the electric bill or put gas in the car, because I could not do both. The biscuit tasted like butter and salt and flour that had been milled the way flour used to be milled. Sarah ate 3 of them. Emma came downstairs at 8, barefoot, rubbing her eyes. She saw Henry, and she said, Good morning, Mr. Henry, in the small, polite voice she used with grown-ups she had decided to trust. Henry said, Good morning, Miss Emma. There are biscuits and there is cocoa, and there is a cat on the back steps who wants to say hello to you, in whatever order appeals. Emma chose the cat first. She went out the back door in her socks and stood on the cold stone step and crouched down and extended her hand to Biscuit. And Biscuit walked over and pressed her head into Emma's palm. And Sarah watched through the kitchen window and felt something very large and very quiet move through her chest. Caleb came down at 8:15, crying because he had woken up alone and could not remember where he was. Sarah held him and rocked him and explained that Mommy had been right downstairs the whole time, that the nice cat was outside, that there were biscuits and Emma was here and everything was fine. Caleb stopped crying. He ate most of a biscuit with a 1/4 inch of butter on top of it. He announced that he was in charge of the cat now, and Emma, coming back inside with her socks wet and her face serious, said, No, Caleb, the cat is in charge of herself. That is how cats work. Caleb thought about this and then agreed. Emma had that effect on him. At 8:45, Sarah took the duffel bag upstairs. She went into the attic alone, and she opened the trunk, and she looked down at what was there, and even in the gray morning light of the round window, even knowing what she would see, she had to sit down on the floor for a minute to steady herself before she could begin. She counted out 100 bundles, $10,000 each, $1 million, exactly half. She placed them in the canvas duffel bag in neat rows. She zipped it closed. She closed the trunk. She took the lavender sachet that had been tucked in with the linens, and she put it in her pocket, because she had decided that she was going to carry some part of her aunt with her into the bank, and it seemed wrong to carry money without carrying something that mattered more than money. She carried the duffel bag downstairs. It was heavy. Henry saw it and said nothing, and took it from her, and walked it out to his truck, which was an older blue pickup with a camper shell on the back and no visible dents, and he set the bag in the passenger footwell of the front seat. Sarah buckled her children into the back seat of the Civic. Henry drove his truck. Sarah followed. The plan, worked out with Patricia, was that Henry would drive the money, and Sarah would drive the children, and they would travel as a 2-vehicle convoy to Burlington, because Patricia did not want Sarah in a car with $1 million and 2 small children at the same time, not because anything was likely to happen, but because Patricia was a lawyer who had watched 30 years of rich people's plans go wrong for want of basic caution. Emma looked out the window for most of the drive. Vermont in late October was a country she had never seen, the leaves holding on in copper and gold, stone walls marching through empty pastures, little white churches appearing and disappearing between hills. Caleb fell asleep inside of 15 minutes. Emma, watching a barn go by with its door hanging open and a dog lying asleep in the sunshine of the doorway, said, Mom, is it always like this here? Pretty much, Sarah said. Emma did not say anything else for a long time. Then she said, I think I like Vermont. Me too, baby. Patricia Alden was waiting outside the credit union when they arrived. She was a woman in her early 60s, iron gray hair cut in a sharp line at her jaw, wearing a navy blazer and sensible shoes, and the expression of a person who was not going to let anything today go sideways. She walked to Sarah's car as Sarah parked, and she opened Sarah's door before Sarah could, and she said, "Sarah, you made it." And then she said, "You look exactly like her. I am so sorry for your loss." Sarah got out of the car. She did not know what to say to this woman, so she said, "Thank you for everything," and Patricia waved her off, not dismissively but efficiently, like a woman who did not want to waste feeling on ceremony when there was work to do. Henry lifted the duffel bag from the truck. Patricia looked at it. She looked at Sarah. She said, "Let's go inside, shall we?" Inside the credit union, the manager, a woman named Linda, was waiting in a small back office that she had cleared for them. Patricia had prepared every document ahead of time. A transitional trust account was opened in Sarah's name for an initial deposit of $250,000, which Linda counted by machine twice, with a neutral professional face that suggested she had done this kind of counting before. A safe deposit box was signed over to Sarah, the largest one the branch had, and the remaining $750,000 was placed inside it in the same rows Sarah had arranged in the duffel. Sarah signed papers she barely read because Patricia had already read them for her. She signed her name 11 times. Her hand was steady. She thought, "This is the strangest thing that will ever happen to me." And then she realized, no, it wasn't. The strangest thing that had ever happened to her was getting a phone call at 7:30 in the morning from the state police telling her that her husband's truck had been hit head-on by a drunk driver on Route 30 and that she needed to come to the hospital. And this, by comparison, was not strange at all. This was just paperwork. Afterward, they sat in Patricia's office 3 blocks away. Emma had a coloring book Patricia had produced from a drawer, and Caleb had fallen asleep again on the waiting room couch with Henry keeping an eye on him. And Sarah sat across the desk from Patricia and listened while Patricia walked her through the next 12 months. $250,000 in the trust account would cover immediate needs. The safe deposit box would hold the cash reserve while the rest was structured. The remaining money in the trunk, the other $1 million, was still in Ashfield, and Patricia wanted it moved, in increments, over the next 10 days, into a second safe deposit box, and then into a diversified portfolio that Daniel Torres in Boston would set up on Wednesday. Nothing large and sudden. Nothing traceable as a lump sum. Nothing that would trigger flags or cause problems. Aunt Margie had done the hard part by accumulating the cash quietly over 18 months. Patricia's job, now, was to unwind it carefully in the other direction. The money, Patricia said, is legal. Your aunt earned it through the sale of property, invested it legitimately, paid every tax she owed, and withdrew it from a recognized brokerage account. There is a paper trail for all of it, which I have in a binder you will take home today. You have nothing to hide, Sarah, but you also have no reason to announce yourself. A woman in your position, suddenly visible as a person with money, becomes a target. Lawsuits, long-lost cousins, scam artists, boyfriends you do not want, your own family, frankly. So we are going to do this quietly. We are going to keep your public life looking very much like your public life looked last month, for at least a year. We are going to upgrade your circumstances gradually enough that nobody outside your household notices the change before you want them to. Sarah said, "What does that mean practically?" "Practically," Patricia said, "it means we are not buying you a house this week. We are going to find a small, simple rental in a good school district, in a town nobody in your family has any reason to look for you in, and we are going to move you there this month. You will keep your day job for now, if you like. You can quit the diner. Nobody will notice you quitting a diner. You are going to pay off your immediate debts, quietly, in the order I give you. You are going to fix the Civic or buy a modest used car, your choice, nothing flashy. You are going to enroll your daughter in a new school where she can just be a little girl for a while. You are going to sleep. You are going to eat. You are going to stop running." Sarah said, "And my family." Patricia looked at her over the tops of her reading glasses. "Your family is a separate conversation. I have met many families like yours, Sarah. When they find out about the money, they will come. Some of them will come politely, with sad stories. Some of them will come angrily, with threats. A few of them will come with lawyers. I want you to promise me that when any of those things happen, you will call me before you do anything else. You will not argue with them. You will not try to explain yourself. You will not apologize. You will hang up the phone, or you will close the door, or you will get back in your car, and you will call me, and I will handle it from there. Do you understand?" Sarah nodded. "I want to hear you say it," Patricia said, not unkindly. I understand, Sarah said. I will call you. Good, Patricia said. Now, take your children home. By which I mean, take them back to Margie's house. Rest there for the rest of the week. Drive back to Pennsylvania on Sunday. Give notice at your current apartment on Monday. I will have a moving company call you. I have already identified 3 rental homes in 3 different towns for you to consider, in or near the Pittsburgh area, since that's where you have family connections you want to maintain. Or, she paused, or if you decide you want to be further away, we can find you something in New England, or anywhere in the country you like. That is your choice. Sarah thought for a moment. Then she said, I want to think about that. About where we live. Of course, Patricia said. You have time. They drove back to Ashfield in the late afternoon, and the light was coming in low and gold across the hills, and Caleb woke up and asked for a snack, and Sarah, who had in her wallet $400 in 20s that Patricia had given her from the new account as a starter float, pulled into a diner in a small town, and she and Henry and her children sat in a booth and ordered grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup and milkshakes. And Sarah paid for all of it without flinching, without adding up the prices in her head, without apologizing to the waitress for the size of the tip. The waitress was a woman about Sarah's age with tired eyes and a name tag that said Denise. Sarah left her $40 on a $30 check. Denise looked at the money and then at Sarah. Sarah said, Thank you for being nice to my kids. Denise, who had watched Caleb knock over his water glass twice and Emma line up all the sugar packets in alphabetical order, said, Honey, you have good children. Sarah said, Thank you. It felt, in that exchange, like the first time a stranger had seen her in 3 years. They spent 4 more days in Ashfield. Sarah slept 8 or 9 hours each night for the first time since she had been pregnant with Emma. She walked the children through the town. They visited the general store, and Sarah bought them each a small wooden toy because the store sold wooden toys, and Caleb chose a train and Emma chose a horse, and they bought bread and butter and eggs and a jar of local honey. They visited the cemetery where Aunt Margie was buried, a small flat stone under a maple tree, and Sarah placed flowers on it, and she stood there for a long time without speaking, and Emma, after a minute, reached up and held her mother's hand. They built a fire in the fireplace. Sarah read them stories from the books on the shelves. She and Henry got the furnace serviced. She got a new battery put in Margie's old Buick that was sitting in the garage because Patricia had pointed out that the car, too, was part of the bequest and was worth about $5,000, and Sarah said out loud, I have 2 cars, and laughed, and cried a little, and laughed again. On Saturday night, the night before they left, Henry came over for supper, and Sarah cooked chicken and potatoes in her great-aunt's kitchen. Emma set the table with the good china that was stored in the hutch. Caleb fed pieces of chicken to Biscuit under the table, and Sarah did not correct him, because she had decided that for one meal Biscuit could be spoiled. After the children were in bed, Sarah and Henry sat in the front room with 2 small glasses of brandy that Henry had produced from somewhere, and they did not talk much. They watched the fire. Finally, Henry said, You're coming back, right? Sarah looked at him. For what? For the house. It's yours, you know. That's in the will, too. Patricia didn't mention it because she wanted you to focus on the money first, but the house, the land, Margie's car, all of it. It's yours. Sarah had known, in a back corner of her mind, that this must be true. The letter had said everything, but she had been so overwhelmed by the trunk that she had not allowed herself to think about the house. She looked around the front room, at the green armchair, at the photograph on the mantel of her 9-year-old self, at the fireplace. She said, I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. You don't have to decide now, Henry said. It'll keep. I'll check on it for you. I'd check on it anyway, because your aunt was my friend and I miss her, but I'd rather check on it knowing it still belongs to somebody who cares about it. Sarah nodded. She said, Thank you, Henry, for everything. Henry looked at the fire. He said, She talked about you all the time in that last year. She was worried about you. She didn't know if she would live long enough to see you taken care of. In July, when the doctor told her it was definite, she sat right in that chair you're sitting in now, and she said to me, Henry, it's going to be close, but I think I can do it. I think I can make sure she knows. And then she went upstairs and wrote that letter. He looked at Sarah. She loved you, Sarah. She didn't get to say it to you in person. I'm telling you on her behalf. Sarah did not speak for a long time. When she did, she said, I wish I had known her better. So do I, Henry said. But she would tell you, the past is done, and the future is what you do now. so do it well. They drove back to Pennsylvania on Sunday. The trunk rode in the trunk of the Civic, wrapped in a blanket, with the remaining $750,000 still inside it. Patricia had been emphatic that Sarah should not drive a second load of money across state lines. That amount, once divided over 2 safe deposit boxes, was going to be moved by a bonded courier service Patricia had used before. But the trunk itself, empty now of cash but full of the linens and the locket and the letters and the bundle of old photographs Sarah had found under the quilt that Sarah wanted to bring home. She did not fully trust that she was not going to wake up and find that all of this had been a dream. She wanted the trunk where she could touch it. They arrived at the duplex on Pine Ridge Road at 9 o'clock at night. Caleb was asleep. Emma was quiet. Sarah carried her son inside and put him in his bed, and Emma went to her room without being asked and got into her pajamas and brushed her teeth. Sarah stood in her own bedroom and looked at it with new eyes. The mattress on the floor, the milk crate that served as a nightstand, the small pile of bills she had left on her dresser before the trip. It looked smaller than it had looked when she left. It looked like a place she was going to be leaving, not a place she had come home to. She unpacked the duffel bag of clothes. She opened the window to let out the stale smell. She went out to the Civic and carried the Cedar trunk into the house by herself, step by step, resting twice. It was heavy, not because of cash, but because it was solid cedar and it had 120 years of life in it. She put it at the foot of her bed. She sat down on the floor next to it and put her hand on its lid, and she said, out loud, very quietly, "We're home. We're going to be okay." The phone rang at 7 the next morning. It was her mother. "Sarah," her mother said, in that voice. "So, you're back. How was the big treasure hunt?" Sarah was standing in her kitchen in her pajamas. She had made a cup of coffee. Emma was still asleep. Caleb was watching a cartoon in the living room with the sound low. Sarah had expected this phone call. She had prepared for it. In the car, during the long drive home, she had run through what she would say 20 different ways. She had decided, in the end, to say almost nothing. "It was nice, Mom," she said. "Uh-huh. So, what was in the trunk?" "Some nice things," Sarah said. "Some photographs. Some linens. A quilt. A locket. Some of Aunt Margie's letters." Her mother was silent for a moment. Then she laughed. She said, "Sarah, honey, I told you. I told you and told you. You drove those kids across 3 states for a quilt. In that car. A quilt, Sarah. I could have bought you a quilt at the Walmart." Sarah said, "It's a nice quilt, Mom." "Of course it is, honey," her mother said, her voice dripping. "I'm sure it's beautiful. I'm sure it's the prettiest quilt anyone has ever put on a crappy mattress in a crappy duplex. I'm sure it smells like the 1940s. I'm sure it makes all your problems go away. I hope you had a nice little vacation, Sarah, because you still owe rent on the 5th, and you still have 2 kids to feed, and you still have to explain to the diner why you missed 2 Saturday shifts. That's reality, honey. That's the world I live in. That's the world you live in. I just don't want you forgetting that because you got a weekend in Vermont out of an old woman's sentimentality." Sarah closed her eyes. She thought of Patricia's advice. Do not argue. Do not explain. Do not apologize. Sarah said, "Thanks for checking in, Mom. I have to get Emma ready for school." She ended the call. She set the phone face down on the counter. Her hand, she noticed, was not shaking. Her chest was not tight. Her mother's voice had rolled over her and off of her like water. And for the first time in 34 years of being her mother's daughter, Sarah had simply declined to participate in the conversation her mother was trying to have. It was a strange sensation. She thought it might be the sensation of being an adult in her own life. Nathan called that afternoon, while Sarah was at the billing office. She did not answer. He left a voicemail. It was a long voicemail. She listened to it on her lunch break, sitting in the Civic in the parking lot, with a protein bar in her hand that she was not actually eating. "Hey, Sarah," he said, voice oily and friendly. "Heard you got back from your treasure hunt yesterday. Mom said you brought home a quilt." "Ha. Listen, I was thinking. I've been thinking about that house situation, and I know things got weird after Mom died, and I know there's been some bad feeling, and I want to clear the air. I was thinking maybe you and the kids could come over this weekend. Hannah and I were going to do a little cookout. Burgers. Hot dogs. The kids can see their cousins. We can talk about some things. I think there might be some financial stuff we should straighten out. I know you've been struggling, and I feel bad about how that all went down, and maybe there's something I can do. Give me a call back. Let's get together. All right. Love you, sis. Talk soon." Sarah listened to the voicemail twice. Then she deleted it. She did not call him back. She did not know how Nathan had decided, in the last 72 hours, that he now wanted to bury the hatchet with a sister-in-law he had not spoken to in 5 months. But she had her suspicions. Her mother had told him about the trunk. He had pretended, on the phone to her mother, to find it as hilarious as her mother did. And then he had gone home and thought about it. And then he had thought, what if there actually was something in that trunk? And then he had thought, Sarah is stupid and broke, and she'd give me half for a cookout. And then he had called her. She was not imagining this. She had known Nathan since she was 22. She knew, precisely, the order of operations inside his head. That night, after the children were in bed, Sarah called Patricia. It was after hours. Patricia answered anyway. Nathan called, Sarah said. Already, Patricia said. Impressive. What did he want? A cookout this weekend. Patricia laughed, a short bark. Of course he did. Let me guess. Someone mentioned you got something in Vermont. My mother. Your mother did not waste a minute. No, Sarah said. She did not. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Sarah, I want you to do something. I want you to not go to that cookout. I want you to send a polite text, tomorrow, that says, thank you for the invitation. The kids have something else going on. Let's catch up later. And then I want you to not respond to any further invitations from Nathan for at least 2 months. Can you do that? I can do that. Good. Do not tell him anything. If he asks about the trunk, tell him what you told your mother, which I assume was some version of a quilt and some sentimental items. If he pushes, say, Nathan, I really don't want to talk about Aunt Margie's things. It's still fresh. Be polite. Be unspecific. Be boring. Boring is the most powerful weapon you have right now. Patricia, Sarah said. I don't know how to be boring. Apparently, I'm the most dramatic person my mother knows. Patricia laughed again. Sarah, she said, honey, that's not drama. That's just her assessment of you. The drama was always hers. Now listen. About the house rentals. I have 3 options. I'm going to email them to you tonight. You look at them tomorrow. We pick one by Friday. And we're out of Pine Ridge Road in 2 weeks. Okay, Sarah said. After she hung up, she sat at her kitchen table and pulled up Patricia's email on the old laptop she used for the billing job. 3 houses. One was in a town 40 minutes north of where she was now. One was closer to Pittsburgh. One was in West Virginia, in a small town near a state university, with good schools and a park within walking distance of the listed address. The rent on the third was $1,100 a month, and it was a 3-bedroom with a fenced yard, and the photographs showed a bright kitchen and a sunroom and a garden that the landlord kept up, and Sarah looked at it for a long time. She clicked through every photograph. She read the description twice. The town was called Millridge. She had never heard of it. It was 2.5 hours from her mother and 4 hours from Nathan. It had a good elementary school. It had a children's hospital within 30 minutes. She called Patricia back. I want the third one, she said. Millridge. Good choice, Patricia said. I'll have them send an application tonight. You'll be approved by tomorrow. I'll cover first and last and security. You can move in 2 weeks from today. Sarah put her head down on her kitchen table. She cried for a minute, silently, with her face against the formica. Then she sat up, wiped her eyes with the hem of her shirt, and she went to check on her children. Emma was awake. She was sitting up in her bed with the light on, reading a book. When Sarah came in, Emma said, Mom, can I ask you something? Of course, baby. Emma put the book down. She said, Are we moving? Sarah sat on the edge of Emma's bed. She took her daughter's small hand. Yes, she said. We are moving. Not this week. In 2 weeks. I found a house. It's in a different town. It has 3 bedrooms. One for me, one for you, one for Caleb. It has a yard with a fence. Are you okay with that? Emma thought for a long time. Then she said, Will I go to a new school? Yes. Can I bring my books? Yes. Will we have enough money for food there? Sarah's throat closed. She held her daughter's hand tighter. Yes, she said. We are going to have enough money. We are going to have more than enough money. For a long time. Aunt Margie, what she left me, it's going to take care of us. I need you to trust me on that, baby. I need you to stop worrying about money. That's my job now. And I promise you, it's going to be okay. Emma looked at her mother with her serious dark eyes. She said, Okay. And then she said, Can I tell Caleb we're moving somewhere with a yard? He wanted a yard. You can tell him in the morning. Emma nodded. She picked up her book. Then she said, without looking up, Mom, Aunt Margie was nice. Wasn't she? Yes, Sarah said. She was. I'm glad she left us something, Emma said. Even if it wasn't treasure. I'm glad she thought about us. Sarah kissed the top of her daughter's head. She did not correct her. She went to her own room, and she sat on the floor beside the cedar trunk, and she put her hand on the lid, and she said, quietly, Aunt Margie, you did it. You did exactly what you said you would do. You saved us. The 2 weeks that followed were the strangest Sarah had ever lived. She went to the billing office every day as if nothing had changed. She told no one. She did not quit. She ate her sad lunch at her desk. She answered her phone politely to doctors' offices about outstanding balances. And then at 5 o'clock she drove home, and she entered a parallel life that nobody else in the world knew about. A life in which Patricia called every evening with updates. A life in which a bonded courier picked up the cedar trunk from Margie's house in Vermont, moved the remaining $750,000 into the second safe deposit box, and returned the empty trunk to Ashfield, where Henry would keep it safe until Sarah came back. A life in which Daniel Torres, on a Wednesday afternoon conference call, walked her through a 10-year investment plan that would convert her aunt's cash into a conservative portfolio, generating enough annual income to cover her family's modest living expenses forever. A life in which she wrote checks to pay off the hospital bills for Caleb's pneumonia, the collection agency for the emergency room visit when Emma had needed stitches at 3, the last 18 months of back rent her landlord had quietly let slide when she had fallen a month behind, the utility companies, the credit card she had used to buy Emma's shoes in August. She paid every single debt she had, in order, with a shaking hand, and when she was done, she had a clean financial slate for the first time since she had been 22 years old. She did not tell her mother. She did not tell Nathan. She did not tell Jessica yet, though she wanted to, because Patricia had asked her to wait 2 weeks, and Sarah was going to do exactly what Patricia asked. She told the billing office on a Thursday that she would be giving her notice, effective in 2 weeks. Her boss, a woman named Carol who had always been decent to her, asked why. Sarah said, I'm moving. For family reasons. Carol nodded and said, We'll be sorry to lose you, Sarah. You've been reliable. And Sarah said, Thank you, which was the most she had thanked any boss for anything in her entire working life. Because in that moment she realized that Carol had, in fact, been reliable back to her, that Carol had not once questioned her when she had needed to leave early for sick kids, that Carol had, when Sarah's health insurance lapsed, quietly arranged for her to be paid a small bonus that exactly covered the COBRA premium for 3 months. Sarah had not thanked her then. She thanked her now. She told the diner on a Saturday night, at the end of her last shift. The manager was annoyed because she had not given enough notice. He said, Sarah, come on. Sarah said, I'm sorry, Danny. Something came up. I have to move. He said, Well, I can't hold your job. Sarah said, I understand. She cashed out her tips, $63 for 4 hours, and she walked out of the diner at 11:30 at night, and she got in her Civic and she sat in the parking lot, and she thought, I will never work another night shift in that diner. I will never again watch a drunk man grab a waitress's arm and pretend not to see it because I cannot afford to make a scene. I will never again come home at midnight and eat a cold grilled cheese in my kitchen before falling asleep in my work clothes. She drove home. She did not cry. She felt, instead, a great quiet. Like a storm that had been ripping through the house of her life for 3 years had finally gone down to a distant rumble. The rumble was still there. She knew it would take years for it to fully fade. But the house was standing, and her children were asleep in their beds, and she had enough money to keep them fed and housed and clothed and going to the doctor for the rest of their childhoods. And her Great-Aunt Margie had done that for her, and Sarah was never, ever going to forget that. Moving day came. She had hired a moving company at Patricia's suggestion, a small local outfit, and they came with a truck and 2 young men who packed up her duplex in 3 hours. Sarah had not accumulated much in 11 months. 3 people's worth of clothes, a small collection of toys, a few kitchen things, the mattress on the floor, which she left behind, because she had ordered a bed for each of them to be delivered to the new house. The cedar trunk, which went on the truck carefully, padded in blankets, strapped in. The box of photographs she had kept of David, which she had not opened in a year, and which she was bringing with her because they belonged to her children more than they belonged to her. Her landlord was there when she moved out. She had given him 2 weeks' notice in a polite written letter and paid him through the end of the month. He was standing in the doorway of his unit next door, watching the movers, and when Sarah walked past him carrying a box of cereal, he said, "Well, moving up in the world, are we?" "Yes," Sarah said, without stopping. He blinked. He had expected her, as he had always expected her, to stop and apologize and explain. She did not stop. She put the cereal in the car. She came back for the next box. He watched her the whole time. When the movers were loaded up and ready to go, and Sarah had buckled her children into the Civic for the drive, he was still standing in his doorway. Sarah walked up to him. She said, "Mr. Peterson, thank you for the 11 months. I hope things go well for you." He was so taken aback by her tone, which was pleasant and final and not even slightly apologetic, that he did not answer. He just nodded. Sarah got in the car. She drove away. In the rearview mirror, she could see him still standing there, a small figure in a doorway that was about to stop being her doorway, and she did not feel sad, and she did not feel angry, and she did not feel anything at all about him. And that, more than the money, was the thing that made her understand that something inside her had changed forever. The new house in Millridge was small and bright, and sitting on a quiet street where old maple trees leaned over the sidewalks. The yard had a fence. The kitchen had a window over the sink that let in the morning light. The children's rooms had been painted, at the landlord's expense, because Patricia had negotiated it. Emma's room was a soft green. Caleb's was a pale blue. There were beds already delivered, and they were real beds, with real frames and real pillows and real sheets that Sarah had bought at a proper store without looking at the price tags. There was a new couch, a dining table, a television that Sarah had not bought because she did not want one yet. Sarah walked her children through the house. Caleb ran from room to room shouting, "This one's mine, this one's mine." Emma walked more slowly, touching each door frame, opening each closet. She stopped in the kitchen. She stood at the window over the sink. She said, "Mom, there's a bird feeder in the yard." "Who put that there?" "I did," Sarah said. "This morning, before you got here." Emma turned to face her mother. She said, "Mom, I have to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." "Okay, baby. Aunt Margie didn't just leave you a quilt, did she?" Sarah crouched down. She looked her daughter in the eyes. She said, "No, baby. She left us a lot more than a quilt. She left us enough that we are going to be okay. Enough that you do not have to worry any more about anything you were worrying about. I did not want to tell you until we were in our new house, because I wanted you to see it first. I wanted you to know that this is real. We live here now, and we are safe. And I am not going anywhere, and Caleb is not going anywhere, and this house is not going anywhere. We are home." Emma was silent for a long moment. Her eyes filled up, which Emma's eyes almost never did. Then she put her arms around her mother's neck, and she said, into Sarah's shoulder, "Mommy, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you." Sarah held her daughter in the middle of the new kitchen while Caleb ran through the house shouting that he had found a second bathroom, and the afternoon light came through the window over the sink, and somewhere far away in a small Vermont town, in a cemetery under a maple tree, a woman who had loved her great-niece from a distance for 40 years was, Sarah hoped, somehow able to feel this moment, able to know that it had worked, that Sarah had understood, that the trunk had opened and the children had come through safe, and the long waiting was finally over. That night, after the children had fallen asleep in their new beds, with Caleb wearing his new pajamas and Emma with a small stack of library books on her nightstand, because Sarah had taken her to the Millridge Public Library that afternoon and gotten her a card, Sarah called Jessica. Jessica answered on the second ring. "Sarah," she said, "where the hell have you been? Mom said you disappeared. She said you're not answering her calls." "I haven't disappeared," Sarah said. "I've just been busy. I moved." "You moved?" "Sarah, where? How?" "I moved to Millridge, West Virginia. I got a house, a rental, 3 bedrooms." There was a long pause on Jessica's end. Then Jessica said, carefully, "Sarah, how did you pay for a 3-bedroom house?" Sarah sat down on her new couch. She looked around the living room, at the boxes she had not yet unpacked, at the framed photograph of David she had set on the mantel over the fireplace. She took a breath. She said, "Jess, Aunt Margie didn't leave me a quilt." Another silence. Jessica said, "Okay. She left me $2 million. The silence on the other end stretched so long that Sarah thought the call had dropped. Then Jessica, very quietly, said, "Oh my God. Sarah, oh my God." "In cash," Sarah said. "In the trunk. Under a false bottom. packed in $100 bills. She had been putting it there for a year and a half. She had a lawyer. She had a plan. She had it all worked out. She left me a letter. She left me instructions. I've been working with her lawyer for 2 weeks to get everything safe. I couldn't tell anyone until everything was protected. I'm telling you now because it's protected. And because you are the only person in our family I trust to know. Sarah, Jessica said. Her voice was unsteady. Sarah, I'm crying. I'm sitting here crying at my kitchen table, and Tom is looking at me like I've lost my mind. Sarah said, I'm sorry. I should have. I wanted to tell you sooner. The lawyer said. She said I had to protect it first before I could tell anyone. Because once people know, they come. No, Jessica said. No. You did the right thing. Sarah. Oh my God. Aunt Margie. That woman. She cut us all off for 40 years, and then she. Oh, Sarah. Have you told Mom? Sarah laughed. She could not help it. Absolutely not. Good, Jessica said immediately. Good. Do not tell her. Sarah, listen to me. She will ruin your life. She will show up at your door. She will make a scene. She will tell Nathan, and Nathan will, oh God, Nathan will lose his mind. Sarah, you cannot tell them. Not yet. Not ever, if you can help it. Does Nathan know? Nathan knows I got something. Mom told him. He called me the day after I got back. Wanted to have a cookout this weekend. Wanted to bury the hatchet. Jessica made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a cry. Oh, he tried that, did he? Sarah, listen to me. Listen. Do not go to that cookout. Do not answer his calls. Do not engage at all. If he shows up, call the police. I mean it. He already stole Eleanor's house from you. He will try to find a way to get to this money. I know, Sarah said. My lawyer has said the same thing. I have a plan. I'm not telling them. I'm going to keep going to work for a while. I'm going to keep my life looking the same from the outside. I'm going to let them think I inherited a quilt. Oh, Jessica said. Oh, that's good. That's exactly right. Sarah, you are smarter than people give you credit for. You always have been. I am so glad you are being careful with this. I'm being careful, Sarah said, because Aunt Margie was careful. She gave me the tools. I just have to use them. Jessica was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Sarah, how are the kids? Emma figured out something was up today. I told her tonight. Not everything, not the number, but I told her we were going to be okay. She cried, Jess. She cried like she had been holding her breath for a year. Caleb is running around the new house like a puppy. He keeps finding things. He just found a loose floorboard in the hallway and announced that this is now where he keeps his treasure. Jessica laughed. Sarah heard the laugh break and go into something else. Jessica said, I am so happy for you. Sarah, I am so happy for you. You deserve this. You deserve every penny of this. I have been so worried about you for 3 years. I have been so worried. I couldn't help you the way I wanted to. Tom and I, we're okay, but we're not. You know, we don't have extra. And I felt so guilty because I could see what you were going through and I couldn't fix it. Sarah said, Jess, stop. You called me. You called me every Sunday night. For 3 years. You never missed a Sunday. You have no idea what those phone calls were to me. They were just phone calls, Sarah. No, Sarah said. They weren't. They were everything. Both of them were quiet for a minute. Then Jessica, in a small voice, said, Sarah, can I come see you? Can I drive out there? This weekend. I want to see the house. I want to see the kids. I want to hug you. I want to bring you a housewarming gift. Please. Yes, Sarah said. Come. Please come. They talked for another hour. Sarah told her about Henry. About Patricia. About Biscuit the cat. About the town of Ashfield and the farmhouse and the photograph of 9-year-old Sarah on the mantle. Jessica listened. Jessica asked the right questions. Jessica did not, once, ask how much Sarah was planning to give her, or whether Sarah could help her out with a few things, or whether there might be a piece of this for the rest of the family. Jessica was, Sarah realized, the only person in her family who had not, in the last 2 weeks, tried in some form to position herself for a cut. Sarah did not forget that. When they hung up, Sarah went to the kitchen and got a glass of water. She drank it standing at the sink, looking out at the dark yard with the bird feeder in it, and she thought about Aunt Margie's letter. Help someone, sometime, the way I am helping you now. Sarah had not yet decided, in detail, how she wanted to do that in her life. But she knew, standing at that sink, that the first person she was going to help, quietly, over the next year, was going to be her sister Jessica. Not in a big way. Not in a way that made Jessica feel indebted, but in small, careful ways The way her aunt had helped her, from a distance, without announcement, with care. The phone rang at 6:30 the next morning. It was her mother. Sarah let it go to voicemail. She made coffee. She made oatmeal for Caleb. She packed Emma's lunch for the first day at the new school, which would start on Monday, which was 2 days away. The phone rang again. Her mother again. Sarah let it ring out. The third call, 15 minutes later, was from a number Sarah did not recognize. She was about to let that one go to voicemail too, but something made her pick it up. "Sarah," Nathan said. His voice was not oily this time. It was tight. "Nathan," Sarah said. "Where the hell are you?" "I'm at home." "No, you're not," Nathan said. "I'm standing outside your apartment. The landlord says you moved out 2 weeks ago. He says you gave notice and paid through the end of the month, and you were gone. He says you didn't leave a forwarding address. So I'm going to ask you again. Where the hell are you?" Sarah took a breath. She thought of Patricia's instructions. She thought of Jessica's warning last night. She made her voice calm. She said, "Nathan, I moved. That's not any of your business. Please don't come to my home again. I don't know why you would drive an hour and a half to my apartment without calling first. If you want to talk, you can call. But I am not telling you where I live. Not right now." "What is this?" Nathan said. His voice was rising. "What is this about, Sarah? You won't return my calls. You won't come to the cookout. Now you're running. What did that old woman leave you?" "She left me what I told Mom she left me," Sarah said. "A quilt. Some photographs. Some of her letters. Some costume jewelry." "Then why did you move, Sarah?" "Because I found a better rental," Sarah said. "Because Mr. Peterson was an awful landlord and I finally had the energy to look for something better. Because I don't owe you an explanation for where I live." Nathan was quiet for a moment. Sarah could hear a car going past on his end. He said, in a low voice, "Sarah, if you were lying to me, if you got something and you are hiding it, I will find out. You know I will." Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. She thought about saying a lot of things. Patricia's voice in her head, very clear. "Do not engage. Do not explain. Do not apologize." She said, "Nathan, I am hanging up now. Do not come to my old apartment again. Do not try to find my new address. If you want to talk to me like an adult, you can call me. But not like this." She hung up. She put the phone face down on the counter. She stood in her kitchen and she breathed. Emma came in, already dressed, though it was Saturday and there was no reason to be dressed. Emma said, "Was that Uncle Nathan?" "Yes, baby. Did he find us?" "No," Sarah said. "And he's not going to. I need you to know that. He doesn't know where we live. He doesn't know this house. We are safe here." Emma nodded slowly. She said, "Mom, I never liked Uncle Nathan, even when Daddy was alive." Sarah looked at her daughter. She said, "I know, baby. I didn't either." She called Patricia. Patricia picked up on the second ring, even though it was Saturday. Sarah told her about Nathan's call. Patricia was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "All right. Here is what we are going to do. I am going to send you, in an email, a template for a cease and desist letter. You are going to sign it and mail it to Nathan on Monday. It is going to say, in plain legal language, that you do not wish to be contacted by him, that you will not discuss the terms of your aunt's will with him, and that any further attempt by him to locate your residence will be treated as harassment." That is the first move. The second move is, I want you to document every phone call, every voicemail, every text. Keep a log. Date, time, content. If he escalates, that log becomes evidence. Third move. I want you to tell me, today, whether you want me to open a formal file on him. That would mean, if he ever does something that rises to the level of actual harassment or threat, we are ready to move immediately. Do you want me to open the file? Yes, Sarah said, without hesitating. Good, Patricia said. Done. Now, don't panic. Men like Nathan bluster. They are cowards when somebody stands up to them. I have seen hundreds of Nathans, Sarah. I know exactly how this is going to go. He is going to try one more thing. It might be big. It might be ugly. When it fails, he will retreat, because his entire power over you up to now has been based on you being too poor and too tired to fight back. You are not too poor anymore, and you have me to do the fighting for you. Does that help? It helps, Sarah said. Go unpack a box, Patricia said. Hug your kids. Eat something. I'll talk to you Monday. Sarah did unpack a box. She unpacked several. She put the plates her aunt had given her, a simple blue and white set that had been packed in the trunk wrapped in old newspaper, into the cabinets of her new kitchen. She put Emma's books on the built-in shelf in Emma's new bedroom. She put Caleb's stuffed animals in a line across the foot of Caleb's new bed, which had been his specific request. She hung a single picture on the living room wall, a small watercolor of a Vermont barn that she had bought at the general store in Ashfield, because she had wanted something from there in her new house, some small reminder every day that the place existed and that Henry was watching over it, and that Biscuit was being fed. Jessica arrived on Sunday afternoon. She pulled into the driveway in her small silver sedan, and she got out, and she looked at the house, and she covered her mouth with her hand, and Sarah saw her sister cry in the driveway before she had even come to the porch. Sarah went down the walk and hugged her, and they stood there for a long time, not speaking. Then Caleb barreled out of the house and launched himself at his aunt, and Emma followed more slowly, and Jessica crouched down to hug both of them, and the four of them went into Sarah's new house together. Jessica had brought a housewarming plant, a small pot hose and a terracotta pot, and a bottle of wine, and a pan of lasagna she had baked that morning, and a stack of second-hand children's books she had picked up at a library sale the day before. She set these things on Sarah's new kitchen counter. She looked at the kitchen. She looked at the children's rooms. She looked at the bird feeder in the yard. She said, "Sarah, this is beautiful. This is a real home." "I know," Sarah said. They put the lasagna in the oven. They sat at the new dining table while the children played in the living room. Jessica said, "Show me the trunk." Sarah took her upstairs. The trunk was at the foot of Sarah's bed. Sarah had already moved everything of value out of it. The money was long gone, into safe deposit boxes and into Daniel Torres's careful hands. But the linens and the locket and the letters remained. Sarah opened the trunk. Jessica sank to her knees and looked inside. She lifted the quilt out. She held it against her face. She smelled cedar. She started crying again, and this time she did not try to stop. "I remember this quilt," Jessica said. "I remember this. I remember sleeping under this when we visited her that summer you were 9. I had it on the cot in the spare room." "Sarah, she kept it. She kept it for you all this time." Sarah sat on the floor next to her sister. She had not thought about the quilt that way. She had thought of it only as one of the objects in the trunk. But of course Aunt Margie had chosen this quilt on purpose. Of course she had chosen every object on purpose. The locket, the letters, the photograph of the young man in the World War II uniform, who Sarah now understood, after reading the bundle of letters tied with the blue ribbon, had been Aunt Margie's fiancé, killed in 1944, the man she had mourned her entire life, and because of whom she had never married, because, she wrote in one of the letters, "I was given one great love, and I used it up young. And I was not going to insult his memory by pretending a lesser love was the same thing." Jessica pulled herself together after a few minutes. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She said, "I'm sorry. I don't even know why I'm crying this hard." Sarah said, "I think it's because the person who loved us best in our whole family is dead, and we didn't know we needed her until she was gone." Jessica nodded. Her eyes filled up again. "Yeah," she said. "That's exactly it." They sat on the floor together for a long time. Eventually Sarah said, "Jess, there's something I want to tell you, and I want you to say no if you want to say no. But I want to offer. Okay, I'm going to set up a small fund for Emma and Caleb, for their college. But I'm going to do the same for your kids, Madison and Tyler. Same amount. I haven't decided the number yet. I'm still working it out with Daniel, but it's going to be enough that they can go wherever they want to go. I want to do this quietly. I don't want to tell Mom. I don't want Tom to feel weird about it. I'm just going to put it in a trust in your name, and when the kids are old enough, it's there." Jessica sat very still. Then she said, "Sarah, you don't have to do that." "I know I don't," Sarah said. "I want to. Aunt Margie wrote me a letter. It said, 'Help someone, sometime, the way I am helping you now. You are my someone. You and your kids. You called me every Sunday for 3 years. You did not have to. You did it anyway. And when I told you about the money last night, you did not ask me for anything. You just cried because you were happy for me. Do you understand what that means to me? Do you understand that you are the only person who has done that?" Jessica was crying again. She said, "Sarah, okay, for the kids. Not for me. For the kids." "For the kids," Sarah said. "Yes." They went downstairs. They ate lasagna. They drank some of the wine. Caleb, who had decided his aunt was now his best friend, insisted on sitting in her lap for most of dinner. Emma, who was more reserved, showed Jessica every room of the house, and then her new library card, and then the book she was reading. Jessica praised everything. The house, the children, the soup Sarah had made to go with the lasagna. The bird feeder. Sarah watched her sister move around her new kitchen and she felt, with a force that surprised her, the particular happiness of having someone in your own kitchen who loves you without conditions. Jessica stayed until 8. She had to drive back to Delaware that night for her own kids and her own work in the morning. When she left, standing in the driveway with her coat on, she held Sarah's face in her hands, like Sarah was 6 years old and not 34, and she said, "Sarah, I am so proud of you. I am so relieved. I have been so afraid for you. Promise me you will call me. Anytime. About anything. If Mom calls and screams at you, call me. If Nathan shows up, call me. If you just want to tell me what Emma said at dinner, call me." "Okay. I promise," Sarah said. Jessica kissed her on the forehead and got in her car and drove away. Sarah stood in the driveway and watched the taillights disappear down the quiet street, and she went back inside to her children, and she closed the door of her new home behind her. That night, she did what she had been putting off for 2 weeks. She wrote a letter back to her aunt. She wrote it at the new kitchen table with a cup of tea. She used a piece of the cream-colored stationery she had taken from the writing desk in the farmhouse, the same stationery Aunt Margie had used to write the letter to her. "Dear Aunt Margie," the letter began, "I am writing this from my new kitchen. I do not know if you can read it. I do not know if you can see any of this. I do not know what I believe about whether there is any version of a person left anywhere after they die. But I am going to write this anyway, because you wrote to me when you could not know if I would ever read your letter, and it seems fair that I return the favor. I opened the trunk. I took what was inside. I followed every instruction you gave me. Patricia has been kind. Henry has been kind. Daniel in Boston is going to be kind, I think, though I do not know him yet. I paid off every debt I had. I moved the children to a new town where there is a good school and a fence around the yard. My daughter Emma, who is 6, cried for a long time when I told her we were going to be okay, because she has been carrying around the fear of not being okay for so long that I did not realize how heavy it was for her. I am so sorry, Aunt Margie. I am so sorry I did not see it sooner. I told my sister Jessica. She is the only person in the family I have told, and she is the only person I am going to tell for a long time. Nathan has already shown up at my old apartment looking for me. My mother has been calling. I am not telling them. I am going to keep my life quiet, the way you asked me to. I am going to do my best to not let this money change me into a person you would not recognize. I have also decided, in these 2 weeks, that I am going to come back to Ashfield in the spring. I am going to bring the children. I am going to spend the summer in your house. I do not know, yet, whether I am going to live there permanently, or whether I am going to keep it as a second home, or whether I am going to give it to a land trust to preserve. I have time to decide. Henry is taking care of it. Biscuit is waiting. I want to tell you, although I think you already knew, that I remember you now. I remember the garden. I remember the bees. I remember the smell of your kitchen. I remember you sitting on the porch steps with me at dusk and pointing out which birds were finches and which were sparrows. I remember you telling me, when I was 9, that I was the finest person in our family. I did not know what you meant. I do not know if I believe it. But I have carried that sentence in me for 25 years without knowing I was carrying it. And I want to tell you that it is the reason, I think, that I did not quit. When things were very bad, in the bathrooms at night, with the pill bottles and the calculations, the thing I kept hearing was your voice. That I was the finest person in the family. I could not be the finest person in the family if I left my children. So I did not. So here I am. I will take care of your house. I will take care of Henry. I will take care of Biscuit. I will take care of my children. I will do good things with this money, slowly, over a long time. I will help Jessica. I will help other people. I will try to be the person you believed I was. Thank you, Aunt Margie. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for saving my children. Thank you for saving me. I will not waste this. With all my love, and with a gratitude that I do not have the words for, your great niece, Sarah. She folded the letter. She took it upstairs. She put it inside the cedar trunk, between the quilt and the linens. She closed the lid. She stood in her new bedroom, and she put her hand flat on top of the trunk, and she said, out loud, "Good night, Aunt Margie." And then she went to check on her children, and she went to bed. Outside, the October wind moved through the old maples of her new street, and a train whistle sounded somewhere off in the distance, and the lights of Millridge flickered on one by one as the temperature dropped, and in a house on a quiet street that nobody in her family knew about yet, Sarah Whitmore slept more soundly than she had slept in the entire long tunnel of her grown-up life. The escalation came 3 weeks later, on a Wednesday afternoon, when Sarah was at the billing office eating a sandwich at her desk. Her phone buzzed. It was Patricia. "Sarah," Patricia said, her voice very calm, which Sarah had learned was the voice Patricia used when something important had happened. "Nathan has retained a lawyer. His lawyer called mine this morning. They are claiming that Margaret Whitmore was not of sound mind when she wrote the will. They are requesting a full accounting of the estate. They are hinting at a contest." Sarah set her sandwich down. She said, "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that the will is, quote, suspiciously favorable to a distant relative who had minimal contact with the decedent. On the grounds that the estate's declared value of $6 is, quote, implausible on its face." Patricia paused. "Sarah, they suspect. They do not know, but they suspect. And they're going to keep digging." "What do I do?" Sarah said. "You do nothing," Patricia said. "You keep working. You keep living. You let me handle it. I have every document your aunt prepared. I have medical records showing she was sharp as a tack until 10 days before her death. I have the bank records of every cash withdrawal, all perfectly legal, all properly taxed. I have the letter she wrote to you, which is dated and witnessed, which is the cleanest piece of testamentary intent I have ever seen in 30 years of practice. Nathan's lawyer is going to read what we send him on Monday, and he is going to tell Nathan to walk away. I guarantee it. And if Nathan doesn't walk away, then we go to court and we win," Patricia said, "and Nathan pays both sides legal fees, which will be substantial, and he learns an expensive lesson. Sarah, listen to me. Your aunt did not just give you money. She built you a fortress. Every single thing she did was done to make exactly this moment survivable. Nathan is walking into a wall he cannot see. Let him walk." Sarah hung up. She finished her sandwich. She went back to her billing work. She did not tell anyone. That night, she made spaghetti for her children. She helped Emma with her homework. She gave Caleb a bath. She read them both a story. Then she sat on her porch in the cold November dark and she thought about Nathan, and about her mother, and about the long, strange road that had brought her to a small house on a quiet street where her children were sleeping safely in actual beds. The call she had been waiting for came 6 days later. Patricia again, this time at 8 in the morning, before Sarah had left for work. "He folded," Patricia said. "His lawyer read what I sent him. He called Nathan and told him that the will was airtight, that the estate was legitimate, that there was no case, and that any further action would be frivolous and would expose Nathan to counterclaims. I am told," Patricia said, with something almost like pleasure in her voice, "that Nathan screamed at his lawyer for 20 minutes. I am also told," she continued, "that his lawyer quit." Sarah exhaled. She had not realized she had been holding the breath for 6 days. "It's over," Patricia said. "It's not going to come back. Nathan is done. And my mother," Sarah said. Patricia's voice softened, just slightly. "Your mother is a different problem. Your mother cannot hurt you legally. She does not have standing. She cannot reach the money. She cannot reach the house in Vermont. She cannot reach the trusts we have set up for the children. What she can do is keep calling you and saying cruel things. That, Sarah, is a choice you have to make about your own life. Not a legal one. You can block her number. You can set limits on contact. You can decide what kind of relationship, if any, you want with her going forward. That is yours to decide." Sarah thought about it all day. She thought about it while she processed insurance claims at the billing office, and while she drove home, and while she made dinner. That night, after the children were in bed, she sat down at the kitchen table and she wrote her mother a letter. She had decided that she was not going to call her. She was not going to have a screaming match on the phone. She was going to write. The letter was short. It said, "Mom, I am not going to explain myself anymore. I am not going to justify my choices. I am not going to apologize for decisions that are mine to make. I love you because you are my mother. That does not mean I am going to let you talk to me the way you have talked to me for 34 years. I am going to take a break from our relationship. I do not know how long it will be. When I am ready to talk again, I will call you. Until then, please do not call me. If you need to reach me for an emergency, you can call Jessica, and she will reach me. I hope you are well. Sarah." She sealed it. She addressed it. She walked it to the mailbox at the end of her driveway in the cold dark, and she put it in, and she raised the little red flag. Then she went back inside and she did not cry, because she had done enough crying about her mother to last a lifetime, and she was done. She poured herself a glass of water instead. She drank it standing at the kitchen window, and she went to bed. The confrontation with her mother came, finally, at Thanksgiving, 2 weeks after Sarah had mailed the letter. Her mother did not call. Her mother drove 6 hours, at the age of 63, in a car she did not like to drive on highways, because Jessica had, under pressure, given up Sarah's new address. Sarah looked out her front window on a Sunday afternoon and saw her mother's car in the driveway, and she felt, for one short sharp second, all the old fear. And then she felt it pass. Emma and Caleb were at Jessica's for the weekend. Sarah had known, somehow, that something was going to happen. She had sent them on purpose. She opened the front door before her mother could knock. She said, "Mom, come in. I have coffee." Her mother stood on the porch. She looked smaller than Sarah remembered. She looked tired. Her mouth opened, and Sarah could see her preparing some version of the usual opening. And then her mother looked past Sarah into the house, at the neat living room and the framed photograph of David over the mantel and the bird feeder out the window behind it. And something in her mother's face broke, just for a second, just enough. Her mother said, "Sarah? Oh, Sarah, look at this." "Come in," Sarah said again. Her mother came in. She sat on the new couch. Sarah brought her coffee. They sat across from each other, and her mother's eyes were wet, which Sarah had only seen maybe 3 times in her entire life. Her mother said, "Jessica told me. A little. Not much. She said there was an inheritance. She said you had handled it well. She said she was proud of you." Her mother's voice cracked. "She said she had been calling you every Sunday for 3 years. I did not know that. I did not know you needed that." Sarah did not say anything. She had learned, finally, when not to fill a silence. Her mother said, "I have not been a good mother to you. I know that. I have known that for a long time. I did not know how to tell you. I thought if I pretended I did not know, maybe you did not know either." Her mother put her coffee cup down. Her hand was shaking. She said, "Sarah, I am sorry. It was not everything Sarah had once thought she needed. But it was something. It was more than she had ever expected to get." She said, "Mom, thank you. I need some time. I am not ready to pick up where we left off. But thank you for coming. Thank you for saying that." Her mother nodded. She drank her coffee. She stayed 40 minutes. She did not ask about the money. Not once. When she left, she hugged Sarah in the doorway, a stiff hug, the only kind her mother knew how to give, and she said, "Jessica says the kids are doing well. I would like to see them. When you are ready." "When I am ready," Sarah said. And she meant it. Her mother drove back to Delaware. She called 2 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon, not angry, just to say hello. Sarah picked up. They talked for 12 minutes about nothing in particular. It was, in its way, a beginning. Spring came. It came slowly in Millridge, the way spring comes in the mountains, with crocuses pushing up through frost, and then disappearing under a late snow, and then coming back. By April, the maples on her street were budding. By May, Emma had finished first grade at her new school with a report card that said things like a thoughtful reader and a kind friend, and Caleb was enrolled for preschool in the fall, and Sarah had given notice at the billing office because she had decided that she did not want to process insurance claims anymore, that she wanted to spend the summer in Vermont with her children and think about what to do next. They drove up on a Saturday in late May. 6.5 hours. This time the Civic had been replaced by a used Subaru that Patricia's mechanic had found for her. Nothing flashy, a dark green wagon with 80,000 miles and a clean record. The Cedar trunk rode in the back. The children were buckled in with actual road snacks and a stack of books and a portable DVD player. Biscuit was on Sarah's mind the whole drive. Henry was on the porch when they pulled up. So was Biscuit, who did not wait for them to get out of the car. She walked down the steps and across the gravel, and she sat down beside the driver's door and she meowed. Once, with mild annoyance, as if to say, "Took you long enough." They spent the whole summer. Emma planted tomatoes in the garden. Caleb learned the names of 6 different birds. Sarah repaired the back porch railing with Henry, sanding and painting and making it solid again. She had the well inspected. She had the roof looked at. She had a local contractor give her an estimate on what it would cost to fully restore the farmhouse to something between heritage home and modern livability, and the number, which a year ago would have stopped her heart, did not even make her flinch now. She said, "Let's do it." She said, "Start in the fall." She went, alone, one afternoon, to the cemetery. She sat on the grass beside her aunt's flat stone. She did not cry this time. She talked. She said, "I brought the kids. Caleb caught a frog yesterday." Emma reads to Biscuit at night. I'm going to fix the porch railing properly. I'm going to restore the house. I'm going to keep it in the family. I'm thinking I might move up here permanently for part of the year. I don't know yet. I have time. She put her hand on the stone. It was warm from the sun. She said, "You were right about everything." In July, she did something she had been thinking about since January. She set up a foundation, a small one, in Aunt Margie's name. Its only purpose was to provide emergency grants to young widows with small children. No applications, no forms, just a phone number that certain social workers and certain pediatric nurses and certain crisis counselors had been quietly given. A woman calls. The foundation sends her a check for $3,000 within a week. No paperwork, no questions, no follow-up, just money. Once, when she needs it most, the way somebody should have sent Sarah money 3 years ago, and nobody had. Patricia thought it was a good idea. Daniel Torres structured it. Jessica agreed to sit on the small advisory board. In the first 6 months of its existence, the foundation sent out 41 checks. Sarah never met any of the women. That was on purpose. She did not want them to know her. She did not want them to feel they owed her anything. She wanted them to feel, for 1 minute in a very hard stretch of their lives, the thing she had felt on the attic floor in October, which was that someone, somewhere, had seen them and had cared. On a clear evening in August, Sarah sat on the porch of the Vermont farmhouse with Henry. Her children were inside, supposedly getting ready for bed, actually conducting some kind of negotiation with Biscuit that involved a shoelace. The sunset was going pink and orange over the ridge. Henry had brought her a small glass of the same brandy from the first night. Henry said, "You look different." Sarah said, "Different how?" "Like you can breathe," he said. "When you first came up here, you looked like you were holding your breath. You don't look like that anymore." Sarah thought about it. She said, "I'm not holding my breath anymore." She sipped the brandy. She watched the light leave the ridge. Somewhere inside the house, Emma laughed at something Caleb had said, a real laugh, a loud, unself-conscious child's laugh, the kind Sarah had not heard from her daughter in a very long time. The sound of it went through Sarah like sunlight through a window. She thought about her aunt, about the trunk in her bedroom, now empty of money but still full of letters and linens, and the locket and the small sprig of lavender Sarah kept tucked inside. About the long, careful year of planning a dying woman had done for a great-niece she barely knew. About the $6 on the will, which was really the price of a padlock, which was really the price of freedom, which was priceless and therefore, in the eyes of the law, worth nothing. She thought about how she had been a woman who counted quarters for her daughter's milk money. She thought about how she had been a woman who had lain on her bathroom floor and done the math. She thought about how she was, now, a woman sitting on a porch in Vermont, with the sunset on her face and her children laughing in the house behind her and a quiet friend in the chair beside her, and nothing hurt. Nothing was breaking. Nothing was about to be taken away. She thought, "I am the finest person in this family." It was the first time she had ever believed it. Emma came to the screen door. She pressed her small face against the mesh. She said, "Mom, Caleb says he wants to sleep in the garden. Tell him no." Sarah smiled. She said, "Caleb cannot sleep in the garden." "Thank you," Emma said, satisfied, and went back inside. Henry chuckled. He said, "You know what your aunt would have said to that?" "What?" "She would have said, 'Let him sleep in the garden, as long as he's back inside by morning.' She was like that. She thought kids should have adventures." Sarah laughed. She said, "I'm going to remember that." They sat in silence for a while. The first stars were coming out. Somewhere down the valley, a barn owl called. Sarah felt, in her chest, that particular warm, settled thing that she had been learning to recognize over the last 10 months. It was peace. It was the plain, ordinary feeling of peace, which she had not felt in so long that she had forgotten what it was called. She thought about what she would do next. She thought she might go back to school. She had thought, for years, before she had married David, that she wanted to be a nurse. She had given it up because there had been no money and no time. Now there was both. She could take prerequisites at the community college in Millridge in the fall. She could work up to a nursing program in 2 years. She could, in 5 years, be a pediatric nurse, which she thought she would be good at. She thought of Emma and Caleb watching their mother go back to school and finish a hard thing. She thought they might like to see that. She thought about Jessica, who would come up to visit with her own kids next week. She thought about the children's education trusts, already set up, already funded, already quietly earning interest. She thought about her mother, who had not called since the letter, which had been 8 months ago, and who might never call again, which was sad, but which was also a kind of release. She thought about Nathan, whom she had not heard from since December. She did not miss either of them. That surprised her a little. She thought she would, eventually, have to sit with that more carefully. But not tonight. Tonight she was on a porch in Vermont, with a glass of brandy, and the sun had finished setting, and her children were safe, and her great-aunt's house stood steady on its old foundations, and the quilt on her bed had been sewn by a woman who had loved her from a distance for 40 years, and nobody in the world was going to take any of that away. She said, to Henry, or to her aunt, or to the dark hills, or to whoever was listening, "Thank you." Henry did not ask what she was thinking. He just nodded. After a while, he got up, and he said good night, and he walked across the lawn to his own house, his cane tapping gently on the flagstones. Sarah sat on the porch alone for another few minutes. Then she went inside. She kissed Caleb on the forehead, and he was already half asleep, curled around his one-eared rabbit. She kissed Emma on the forehead, and Emma, sleepy, said, "Night, Mom," and turned over. Biscuit was at the foot of Emma's bed, a small warm comma of a cat, her eyes closed. Sarah went to her own room. She sat on the edge of her bed. She put her hand on the lid of the cedar trunk, the way she did every night, because it had become a habit, the way crossing yourself is a habit, a small physical acknowledgement of something larger than yourself. She said, "Good night, Aunt Margie," and she turned off the light, and she slept. In the attic, through the long night, the round window filled slowly with moonlight. The dress form stood quiet in its corner. The rocking chair did not rock. The house settled on its old bones the way it had settled for 120 years. Downstairs, in a room that smelled faintly of cedar and lavender and old wood, a woman who had, one October morning, been given back her life, slept the sleep of a person who no longer has anything to be afraid of. And in the morning, the sun would come up over the ridge, and Caleb would wake first and come padding down the hall in his footed pajamas to climb into her bed, and Emma would follow with a book, and Biscuit would meow to be let out, and Sarah would get up and put on the kettle, and the ordinary good day would begin. And then another, and then another, and all of it, every quiet morning and every ordinary supper and every unremarkable bedtime, would be the inheritance. Not the money, the life the money had bought, the time, the peace, the ability to be, at last, a mother who was fully there for her children, because she was no longer being ground down by the grinding that had nearly killed her. That was what Aunt Margie had given her. Not $2 million. $2 million was just the mechanism. What Aunt Margie had given her was the rest of her own life, handed back to her, in a cedar trunk, wrapped in a quilt, with a letter on top that said, "You will understand when you open it." She had understood. She had understood everything. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.